You motherfuckers can't check that out. I should probably stop calling our listeners motherfuckers. That's like the second episode in a row that I've done that.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. You can find us online at thenerdspodcast.com, facebook.com/thenerdspodcast, Twitter at thenerdspodcast, Instagram at thenerdspodcast. The Nerds You're Looking For on YouTube. You can contact us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And then finally, you can follow both of us on the movie social networking site Letterboxd. I'm at that Tyler Hunt, and my co-host Pat is at the Nerds Podcast. And speaking of Pat, as always, I am right here with him, the man himself, Pat Attack. How's it going, dude?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to finally sit down and record with you, talk nerdy stuff with you. It's been a very hectic and busy and stressful week for me on this end. So I am definitely, I always look forward to chit-chatting with you and talking nerdy stuff, but especially this week after the shit show that was my week.
Yeah, I saw, for those of you that follow us on Twitter, I follow us on Twitter as well, and I'm part of the Twitter, but I saw that you had some car trouble the other day.
Yeah, well, my week kind of started early this week, so I had a comedy show, which I was really, really excited about, but it did not go well. And I think I said something to the effect when I got off the stage. I was like, I think this is the most pissed I've ever been after I just did comedy. So, and there was a couple of different factors, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it was a new venue that I'd never done before. And as doing comedy in Evansville, it sometimes can be kind of a shit show. Like, you just go to random dive bars that just happen to decide to do a comedy night, and that's kind of what this was. But there was quite a few of us on the show, and there was a couple of people that I'd never performed with or hadn't performed with in a while, and so I was definitely looking forward to that. But it just wasn't a very well put together show. The host was not my cup of tea. Like, I think that you need a different type of host than what he was bringing to the table, and he didn't do a very good job with crowd control. And I don't necessarily put all of that on the host. I think some of it is us as comedians have to perform in a certain way and have to bring some sort of energy to the table to get people to pay attention and to stay paying attention. And so I think some of that is on us as performers, but I went up there. By the time I got up there, because I went on somewhat later in the show, by the time I went up there, half of the audience didn't give a shit about what was happening and weren't paying any attention. When I'm literally 30 or 40 feet away from you in this little bar, and I'm on stage with a microphone talking, I have a teacher's voice. Like, I do the podcast, I do YouTube, I do stand-up. Like, I know how to project my voice. When I can hear your conversation over what I'm saying in the microphone, you're being fucking really obnoxious. So yeah, I think it was the most pissed off I've ever been, and kind of the most disappointed I've ever been, like, after a show, because like I said, I was really excited to do that show. And then come Friday, I go to work, and luckily I've been doing this a lot the last like month or two. I've been kind of getting back into Pokemon Go, and there's a few like gyms and Pokestops on my way to work. Like, if I take like this kind of long way to work, so I've been trying to get up earlier and kind of leave earlier for work and kind of hit those things, take like a super long way to work, and then I kind of circle back around. And so luckily I was doing that on Friday morning, because I got out to my car, and my car wouldn't turn over. And I hadn't left the light on or anything like that, so it wasn't anything like that. So I wasn't quite sure what was wrong with it. After a couple of times trying to jump it, I was able to get it to work. And I was like, okay, well, hopefully the alternator will kick in and charge it, whatever, if that was the battery, if that was the problem with it. So I get to work, go to my morning meeting like I always do, and go back out to my car to check on it, and it was dead again. So obviously the battery was dead. So I had to like organize the tow truck to get it, like to come while I was at work, and then go take it to the car place and have them work on it, and kind of try to organize my wife getting off work and coming to pick me up. And then we were going to go get my car from the car place if it was even finished yet, because they weren't sure if they were going to get to it. Luckily, I guess that it was lucky that I was staying over that day anyways, because normally my wife gets off work after I do. So I would have just been stuck at work until she could come and get me. So I guess it kind of worked out perfectly. It was just my battery. My battery was just dead, which it happens. Like your battery only lasts for so long and then it just dies. My experience usually is that it gives you a little bit more of a warning than just one morning. It's just not going to start at all. But yeah, I guess my battery was just dying slowly and I just didn't notice it.
Yeah, I've had that happen before. That always just adds unneeded stress to your day. Yeah, man, I'm sorry you had a shitty week. I mean, for me, my week wasn't much better. It's just been work has been crazy. And it's funny because I think it was Thursday or Friday, I texted you because I thought we were reviewing Luke Cage this week. And I was like, I'm still just 2 episodes in and I don't know that I have the energy to binge this show on my only 2 days off. So I texted you like begging that we review something else. And it turns out that we weren't even supposed to review Luke Cage this week. So that was a highlight of my week, was getting that news. And then, also I ended up, my wife and I went and saw Weezer and the Pixies.
Yeah, I saw that
on Wednesday. And that was a really, really awesome concert. So there were a couple highlights in there. Yeah, but work's been crazy, man. So I'm definitely looking forward to recording today as well.
All right. Yeah, man. So enough of me bitching. I had a little bit more that I was going to say, but I was like, this is going kind of long and it's just me complaining like a little bitch. So, if this is your first episode, we just kind of break every episode down by segments, and we like to start off with, just kind of checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
So I watched the new miniseries on HBO, Sharp Objects. So if you're not familiar, it's an 8-episode miniseries that is based on the book by Gillian Flynn, who also wrote Gone Girl, which, I mean, I have a hard on for that movie. So I was definitely going to be interested in this show. So far, there's only 1 episode that's been released. But again, it's 8 episodes, so it'll wrap up towards the end of August. In this show, it stars Amy Adams. She plays a character named Camille, who's a reporter at I don't know if it's a smaller newspaper, but it's a newspaper in St. Louis. And her boss at the newspaper sends her back to her hometown of Wind Gap, which is in southern Missouri, to cover the murder of a girl and the disappearance of another girl. He's kind of going along the lines of, hey, if I send you back to cover this story and you're from there, like, it's going to tug on people's heartstrings a little bit and may earn you an award or something like that, may get you some notoriety. And she's resistant to do it, but ends up obviously going back. And as she goes back to her hometown of Wind Gap, we soon find out that she's pretty much a wreck. She has an alcohol problem and suffers some mental health issues. Has numerous flashbacks to her troubled childhood. That was harder for me to say than it should have been. To put that into context, at one point, her and her editor at this newspaper were talking, and she tells the editor that people from Wind Gap are either from old money or they're trash. And he asks which she is, and she responds that she's trash from old money. So that kind of puts it into context in that she grew up wealthy. Like, she grew up in this nice house in a wealthy environment, but it's soon pretty obvious that there is a lot of dark history with her past and her relationship with her mom. And the show is kind of diving into that stuff. So there are a lot of intricacies here. I mentioned her mom. Her mom is played by Patricia Clarkson. And then she also has a half sister that she has a lot of issues with. Her half sister's a bit of a sociopath. She's played by Eliza Scanlon. I didn't recognize her from anything, but she promises to play a pretty big part on the show. But overall, like, I'm trying to explain this. There is a lot to the story, but at its core, it's kind of a whodunit. But aside from finding out like who murdered these girls, we're also piecing together Camille's past and exploring her demons, because obviously there's quite a few there. I was really bought into this first episode after not initially knowing what to think. I think that the promotional material for this show makes it look like something it's not. It's really dark, and not only was there solid storytelling in this premiere, but the atmosphere that they've created with this show is really haunting. And I think that plays into the shooting style of the show as well. At parts of this first episode, it almost felt like a horror movie, which is definitely not what I was expecting at all. These characters are incredibly complicated, and the layers have only begun to be pulled back in this first episode. So I'm really anxious to see where the rest of the show goes. I think that a lot of my interest in the show can be attributed to the performances. So I'll be the first person to say, like, I've never been a huge fan of Amy Adams, but I really liked her work in this show. Like, there's been things that she's done in the past that I like here and there, but she knocks it out of the park on this show. She delivers a really haunting performance in this first episode, and I was definitely surprised by it. As soon as episode 1 was over, I was ready to binge the rest of the season, but unfortunately this is one of those shows that I'm watching week to week, so I'm just really looking forward to episode 2 coming out tonight and seeing where this goes. I think for me, the hardest part is going to be, like I said, this is based on a book, so spoilers are out there. Like, I mean, people who have read the book know how this ends, know how they solve the mystery, all of those types of things. So I hope that it is not spoiled for me over this 8-week cycle, but I'm definitely looking forward to sticking with it.
Yeah, when you said that it was an 8-episode miniseries, I was like, oh, so you had time to watch 8 episodes of this, but not Luke Cage. You only watched the first episode, so that makes sense. And you mentioned you had a hard-on for Gone Girl. That's funny that you use that term, because I have a hard-on for Amy Adams, like, constantly, 24/7. I love Amy Adams.
You just have a thing for redheads, man.
I mean, yeah, that's true. My wife is a redhead, so that makes sense. But yeah, I had almost no desire to watch this show, to be honest with you. And I was surprised that you brought it up and that you even gave it a shot. I mean, despite my love for Amy Adams, I think, and you mentioned this, is the marketing material for this show just doesn't do anything for me. My wife and I really love Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is probably one of our favorite shows. I absolutely love that show. I think I've talked about it before on the podcast. And yeah, if you're not watching that show, you definitely should. But every fucking episode that we watch of that show, they've been pimping this show before it, and it just does not look interesting. I will say that before they started pimping this show, they were pimping Succession on HBO as well. Oh, yeah. And I would definitely watch Sharp Objects before I watch that fucking show. But yeah, I don't have any desire to watch this. I'm glad that you're liking it, but it just doesn't seem like I'm going to be that interested in it. Plus, I didn't really like Gone Girl that much, so there's that.
Yeah, I think that there would be parts of it, like if you gave it a shot, I think there would be parts of it you genuinely would enjoy, because like I said, parts of this first episode play like a horror movie. But I mean, I'm not confident enough in that you would like it to sit here and like beg you to give it a shot, because I think this is one of those few places where our tastes differ a little bit.
I honestly would be very excited if you begged me to watch something. Like, not just this, but just in general. I'd like to see your begging.
I kind of begged you to play that Tomb Raider game.
And it worked. That's funny that you bring that up, because we're recording this on Sunday, as we've been doing for the past 6 or 7 months. We usually record Sunday morning, and I started streaming again consistently. And one of the nights I stream is Sunday night, and I finished The Last of Us, and so I'm starting a new game, and it's going to be Rise of the Tomb Raider, so I can get that game over or done with, and in time to do some content for Shadow of the Tomb Raider that comes out, I think, in like 2 months. So I'm pretty excited about it. That's going to be the first night that I start that game. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, as much as I loved that first Tomb Raider game as part of this relaunch, I never played Rise of the Tomb Raider either. So that is definitely on my list to play as well before Shadow of the Tomb Raider comes out. So we'll probably be playing it around the same time.
That'd be cool. I'll definitely have to get your thoughts on it. Well, that kind of leads me into what I'm going to talk about, because for the third week in a row, I'm going to talk about another video game that I've been playing. I have been playing Unravel 2. For those that sub to the YouTube channel, thank you. You know that I've been doing a no commentary walkthrough of Unravel. I recently I never really understood why people did the no commentary walkthroughs, but I started one with Detroit Become Human, and I've kind of grown to appreciate them and kind of like it. So it kind of depends on what the game is. With Detroit, obviously, it was kind of an interactive movie, so most of the game is a long cutscene, and I generally try not to talk too much during the cutscenes anyway, so that kind of makes sense. And this game, if you're not aware, is a platformer, and I'm a huge fan of platformers. It might be probably my favorite genre of video game. I just really, really get into those type of like puzzle platformer type of games. I talked about one a couple of weeks ago with Limbo, and this is kind of another one that I am playing as well. The first one came out, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago. They released a trailer for E3 like 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it came out like 6 months or maybe even a year after they released that trailer at a past E3, and I could never really get into the first game. For those that aren't aware of this game, it's made by I almost said E3. I'm probably going to do that more than once while I'm talking about this game. It's made by EA, but it's not. It's weird because EA kind of has like, I think it's called like the EA Originals or something like that, or maybe it's EA Indies or something like that. They basically take these indie studios, give them money, and they make their game. So it's not like EA had a ton of controlling power over this game. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, A Way Out, that co-op prison break game that came out a little bit ago, I think that was the same thing. So yeah, they do make some pretty cool games, even though they're a terrible company overall. They do make some pretty cool games that aren't sports games. And so I was pretty excited about Unravel. It basically, like I said, it's a platformer game. You play as this tiny, like, yarn creature. It basically looks like a human. I mean, it has the same, like, features of a human, except for you're just, like, really, really tiny. And essentially the gameplay, the mechanics of the game is you use your yarn to basically get from point A to point B as you would in any other platformer. While in the first game, I really couldn't get into it. I really like the aesthetics of the game, and I think the music really fits the tone of the game, and it's really a cute game, but I didn't think that the controls were, I don't want to say they were buggy, but they just weren't as responsive as I would want them to be. And as much as I play platformer games, I'm not like super good at them because I'm an idiot and I will press the wrong button or I'll forget how to do something. And so they can be frustrating at times, but it's even more frustrating when I know I hit the right button and the game just didn't do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And so it was getting kind of frustrating trying to play that game. Plus, I don't think the puzzles were all that innovative. And it wasn't just that they weren't fun. They were. It just like once you start playing the game and kind of getting into it, I think I got into like the most I played it was like maybe 2 hours into the game. It felt like you were just doing the same thing over and over again. Like it was the same like 3 or 4 puzzles just over and over again. And that kind of bummed me out. And so I've sat down, I think either on 2 or 3 different occasions and tried to sit down and beat this game, and I just couldn't get into it. So I didn't think that I was going to be all that into the second one, but they just recently at the past E3, they announced this game, and essentially, and I know there's a term for it, like shadow announcing or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but basically they announce it kind of like what they did with the Netflix Cloverfield Paradox. Was like they showed you a trailer and they're like, oh, by the way, you can play this game now. So I waited a couple of weeks, finished up with Detroit Become Human, and I was like, hey, maybe I'll give this game a shot. And it's a good game to do another no commentary walkthrough for. And I was under the impression, because they really hit this hard with at E3, is that there's another Yarny with you. So there's a co-op version of this game. And I was like, well, I don't know if it's going to be worth my time playing it solo. Well, it turns out that no matter how you play this, with either you play it solo or you play it co-op, you actually have two Yarnies with you, no matter what. And I thought that that was going to be interesting, but also going to be kind of frustrating because, like I said, the first game, the controls weren't all that responsive, so I wasn't sure that having to control two of these things at the same time was going to be all that great. But I think they did a really good job of cleaning it up. The controls work really, really well. It's not, I wouldn't say necessarily perfect, but they definitely work a lot better than they do in the first one. And I just think that having that second Yarny really, and I understand how stupid I sound when I say Yarny, and I've had to say it like 6 times, so I apologize for that. But having that second one really just kind of brings a breath of fresh air to the game, because the puzzles you can do different types of puzzles and more difficult puzzles because I can get by them because I have this other thing to help me, and I just refuse to call it a Yarny again. But and they also have a lot of other like just kind of like complete-ish like I don't know, even like just like these challenges, and they just have like little tiny things to make the game a little bit more interesting, to kind of go back and to want to replay it. Like when you beat a chapter, you can get bronze, silver, and gold medals if you can beat it within under a certain time, which obviously speed running has become a huge thing in the last 4 or 5 years, and platformers are great games to try to speed run. So I love that they're trying to adhere to that audience, because that's definitely who's going to be playing this game for a long time. Like people like me that aren't really into speed running, yeah, we love platformers, we're going to play this game, but the longevity of this game and games like it, really, it's up to the speedrunners if they get into it. And I was like, man, I want to get gold medals on all of these chapters. And then the Chapter 2 is the real first chapter of this game, because Chapter 1 is really just a tutorial. But Chapter 2, in order to get the gold medal, you have to beat the level in 13 minutes in one sitting. My best time was like 19 minutes. You have to be absolutely perfect to get these gold medals. And so that's kind of cool. Like I've seen a couple of people do it online just out of curiosity, just to see if it was even possible. So it is possible, but you have to be absolutely perfect. So I kind of gave up on that pretty quickly. But I do think it's really cool that they had those added little things into the game that are going to make it like the replay value pretty high.
Yeah, I think every week that you talk about like one of these indie games or one of these platformers available on, is this available on Xbox Marketplace?
Yeah, it's the Xbox, the store. I don't know if they have a physical copy. I think it's kind of like Cuphead and certain other games where it's just available on the Xbox Microsoft store.
Yeah, so anytime you talk about one of these games, it sounds like something I'd be interested in playing. I don't like speedrunning either, so I don't know that would add too much of a benefit for me, just because it stresses me out too much. But yeah, I mean, I remember you talking about the first game and thinking that it sounded pretty fun, and this one sounds pretty fun as well.
Yeah, I mean, Limbo might be one of my favorite platform games of all time. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put this game up with it, and I'm only about halfway through the game to begin with anyways, so I am enjoying it quite a lot. But if you had to pick between these two games in Limbo, I definitely pick Limbo.
Gotcha.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics, because Tyler and I are not good at naming segments. So we read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
So, you know what I read this week, because I had to text you to call dibs, even though it sounds like like you weren't interested anyways. But I read Amazing Spider-Man.
Well, I wasn't interested in it. I want to make that pretty
we'll
clear.
Get to it. We'll get
interested
to it.
was not a good word.
Okay, so
I think I talked over you. You're reading Amazing Spider-Man #1.
Yeah. So Amazing Spider-Man #1 just came out this week, written by Nick Spencer and drawn by Ryan Otley. So I was surprised to see this book coming out. So, Dan Slott had written Spider-Man for nearly a decade, and they made a big deal. I guess it would have been last year about most of their comics going back to the original numbering. So I thought it was weird that they are starting Amazing Spider-Man back at a #1 here. But this book definitely feels like a relaunch of sorts. So I guess in a way it definitely makes sense. And then for people that weren't caught up with the other Amazing Spider-Man run, it gives them an opportunity to jump on like I did. So like I mentioned, Dan Slott did write Spider-Man for nearly a decade, which is super impressive. That's a long time to write one character. And through the latter part of those stories he wrote, Peter becomes the CEO of his own company. He becomes the head science editor for the Daily Bugle. And then at one point in Dan Slott's run, he becomes a college grad thanks to Dr. Octopus. And while Slott undid some of that at the tail end of his run, this book manages to clean up pretty much everything else and in a way just kind of take Spider-Man back to the basics. So I don't want to spoil too many plot points because I know you're not caught up, Pat, but the gist of it is that Peter is no longer a CEO. In this issue, his diploma is taken away when a revolutionary new plagiarism software detects that one of Peter's important papers that he wrote while he was in college was actually the work of Otto Octavius, which we all know is because Doc Ock inhabited Peter's body for a bit and got him that degree, which is a whole nother conversation. After his degree is taken away, he gets fired at the Daily Bugle, and he gets basically, stripped of everything that he had worked towards and is back to basics, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So there's a lot more to this issue, including a surprise villain and some cool stuff between Peter and Mary Jane that I won't spoil. But this issue really got me thinking about what Spider-Man is and how it's hard for this character to grow too much because everyone always wants to bring him back to basics or for him to be a struggling guy that happens to be a superhero. So there's been a lot of examples of that over the years with this character. I think one of the biggest examples is probably the One More Day story from 2007 that completely undid Peter and Mary Jane's marriage before Dan Slott started his run. It has to do with Peter making a deal with Mephisto and some other things that happened in that run, but it ended up being pretty divisive amongst fans, and there are still a lot of fans out there that have signed petitions and really want that to be undone and want Peter and Mary Jane to be married. But it makes me wonder what the future of Spider-Man will be and if we're ever going to see this character get a happy ending only to have it reversed, or if it's going to continually be relaunched to see the same stories of a high school kid with superpowers. When a character's been around this long, I don't know how you let him grow with being able to tell the same stories that are true to the character. I mean, I can see why a lot of fans were frustrated with One More Day because it undid so much that had been done for the character, but at the same time, where are the most beneficial stories with Spider-Man? So I say all of that because this first issue of Amazing Spider-Man promises to revisit some old themes and some old flames from Spider-Man's past, and I'm really curious to see where things go. Just because, I hadn't been caught up with Spider-Man for so long, I didn't realize that, Peter and MJ haven't been an item in over a decade. Yep. They've been friends, but it was interesting to see their dynamic in this issue, and I'm curious to see where Nick Spencer is going with some of the decisions he made in issue 1. I definitely had a hard time keeping up with this Amazing Spider-Man whenever Dan Slott was writing it, and that's not necessarily anything negative against Dan Slott. It was just tough to keep up, and I honestly think that with this book, I'm going to be looking forward to it every week. Or I'm sorry, it's not weekly, every month. And I won't fall behind on it like I did with the last run. Like, I really feel like I'm going to stick with it going forward, and it'll be a comic I look forward to, like Batman. So, I mean, Spider-Man's always been one of my favorite characters, and, you know, I think a lot of people like what Dan Slott did with it, and I think you're one of them, so I'm not trying to start an argument there, but I'm very curious to see what Nick Spencer is going to bring that is new here.
Yeah, so I kind of had a love-hate relationship with Dan Slott writing Spider-Man. Obviously, I didn't agree with a lot of his decisions, especially making Doc Ock Spider-Man for a while, obviously in Superior Spider-Man. I don't think that's a spoiler anymore. That's been... I was reading that before we started the podcast. So, I mean, it's been like 5-6 years since that happened. So, yeah, I think that he made some crazy ass choices, but I think overall that he was a really good writer, and I appreciate some of the stuff that he did to the character. I think one of the things that I really liked was that he became the CEO. Like, yeah, I've said this a million times that I fell in love with the character because he's this vulnerable superhero, and then he had to balance all of these things. But like, kind of what you were getting at, you can only do that for so long. Like, the character has to evolve. And I know a lot of people had a problem with him being the CEO and him having all this money and being able to build all this tech. And it's not the Spider-Man that you grew up with. And I understand that, and I can appreciate that. But at the same time, it's like, do you really want to read the same shit over and over again? Like, there's only so much you can do with that story. And so I appreciate that he kind of evolved the character, and it kind of bums me out to hear that it was all for naught. And it seems pretty stupid. Like, I mean, I haven't read it because I want to get completely caught up with Amazing Spider-Man. I'm several issues behind, not quite as much as I was when TNT, like when I was trying to get that caught up a few years ago. I'm not quite that behind on it, but I am a little bit behind on Amazing Spider-Man. So I will get this. I mean, I have a subscription to Marvel.com, and we were talking about this before we started recording. Like, even if I like kind of give up on comics, and I've been cutting out a lot recently, I'm always gonna read Amazing Spider-Man because I just grew up on it for so long. I don't know. Like, I mean, I was excited about Nick Spencer becoming the writer. Like, I thought that he was a really good choice for Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because we talked about the Ant-Man, the most recent Ant-Man run, and he wrote that. And I just think that he has a really sarcastic and really good sense of humor for that character. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, just hearing you describe how they kind of took these things away from him. Like, that's not how college degrees work. Like, once you get it, they can't take it away from you. Can they? Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like they can't do that. Like,
it was like a whole thing. It was not, I don't want to like get into specifics because I don't want to spoil too much, but it was like on a national stage where they were testing this software.
It just, I don't understand how that, like, is legal. It's just, like, once you give it to me, like, deuces, like, I don't know. It just sounds kind of weird, and it just sounds like a really weird excuse just to kind of, like, strip him of all these things and to kind of start over. And hopefully, issue 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth will be really cool stories, and then we won't care why they took away from him. Just the fact that they made this cool story out of it.
Yeah, and there's definitely other stuff in this issue that I left out purposefully to not spoil things, but I think that there is an underlying reason why they took this stuff away from him, more so than just like, hey, Peter Parker has to struggle. Like, that's just what we have to do with the character. I think there is a little bit more than that I won't spoil, but it's definitely just interesting to me. It seems like Spider-Man of all characters is stuck in this continuous loop where you build the character up and develop him, and then you have to knock him back down and start from scratch at some point. So, you know, in the next 10 years, are we going to see a relaunch of Spider-Man where he's back in high school? Like, I wouldn't be surprised. So It's definitely a weird character from a comic book perspective because writers always want to take them back to basics. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think you and I both always read. So that being said, what'd you read this week?
So for the second week in a row, I'm going to follow up on a book that I talked about a number one a few months ago. I talked last week about Death or Glory, and this week I'm going to talk about another Image comic that I actually kept up with, and that is Oblivion Song. If you don't remember, it was written by Robert Kirkman, and the artist on the book was Lorenzo De Felici, which I'm pretty sure I nailed that. Like, I was a little bit nervous because I'm so bad. It's not even like I'm bad at pronouncing them, which I am, but it's like I do it with like a question in my voice, and that I just need to start doing it with like confidence and like owning it, even though I'm going to butcher it anyways. I might as well just own the fact that I'm going to butcher it. So if you don't remember, I talked about this, like I said, when issue number 1 came out, and basically it's sort of a post-apocalyptic book, sort of, because like half of the world is living in the real world and the other part of the world is kind of, these people have gotten sucked into this other dimension called the Oblivion. And there's this main character who's named Nathan. He kind of leads this group of scientists that research the Oblivion, and he kind of goes back in, and they have discovered how to like transport him in and out of this dimension, and he can kind of bring people back. And so there's kind of just a quick synopsis of issue number 1. So I'm going to kind of go through each issue because they just recently released. I don't think it was this, maybe it was last week or maybe it was even this past Wednesday. They released issue number 5. So I'm going to kind of go through each issue, just kind of a little bit about each one. So issue number 2 kind of just expands the mythos. There's a lot of exposition, but you kind of understand that because issue 1 kind of did exactly what I want issue 1 to do, which is not completely spoon-feed us exposition. So eventually, especially with a book like this, that does kind of have a complicated concept, you do understand that eventually you're going to get a little bit of that. But I did appreciate the way that they did it. Basically, in issue number 1, Nathan goes back into the Oblivion, and he finally finds a couple. He rescues a couple, and apparently this is the first people that he's rescued in like over a year. It's kind of thought that most of these people are either dead or they're like, he saved everybody that were still alive over the Oblivion. And so this was his first proof in like over a year that there are still people out there. And so in issue number 2, he's kind of going through and explaining to these people, because they've been trapped in this other dimension for this entire time. So they don't know what happened in the real world. They thought that maybe the real world was destroyed and the Oblivion was the real world. So he kind of had to go through and explain everything to them. And while he's explaining to them, obviously he's explaining to the readers as well. So even though it was super, super exposition heavy, and I might be talking out of both sides of my mouth because I always complain about that, I did kind of appreciate it, and I did understand it. And because it's Robert Kirkman, and I do appreciate his writing, I kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt there. So issue number 3, like I said, I do really appreciate Kirkman's writing, and I think it really shines in this issue. I think he does a really good job of writing these really complicated characters, and I think in issue number 3, you really start to see Nathan struggle with whether or not it's even worth him going back there and trying to save people, because they have been gone for so long. I think they even said it was like 10 years. So there are people still alive in the Oblivion. They've lived there for 10 years. Like, can you even save that person at this point? Like, can they even come back to the real world and adjust to life, like living a regular life? And there's a scene where he kind of meets with this woman that he saved like a year or 2 ago, and basically just kind of checking up on her. And there's definitely a lot of PTSD still there, and she does still have a hard time readjusting, even 2 or 3 years or however long it was since he saved her. And there's a buddy, that one of the scientists that work with him, that he had also saved, and it had been like I don't know if they actually gave you a time frame, but it's been years since he's been saved as well, and he still has like nightmares, and there's still a lot of PTSD. So Nathan's kind of really struggling with the fact that should he even bother saving these people? Is it worth kind of trading his life, because his personal relationships in the real world are really crumbling because he's obsessed with going back in the Oblivion and saving people. And there was one thing that happens in issue number 3 that just shows me how good of a writer Kirkman is. And it's something that you don't see very often, and it's something that Tyler and I have talked about before, is Nathan literally says something to the effect. So basically, he goes back to the Oblivion, and he's trying to save this guy, and the guy has a shotgun, and they get attacked by this monster, and Nathan's just trying to get the guy to come and run away with him, essentially. And the guy just blows the monster away. And Nathan's like, why the fuck did you do that? He's like, we could have easily just gotten away. Like, this is an animal. It's not doing anything wrong. It's doing what animals do. It's just a wild animal trying to survive. This is his world. And I really fucking appreciated that, because you don't get that in a lot of books. Like, I see eye to eye with that. Like, I'm always, I mean, yeah, it would suck if I went hiking or something and got mauled by a mountain lion or something like that, but I'm in the mountain lion's territory. Like, I get that. Like, I hate when movies and TV kind of villainize Mother Nature or animals, and so I really appreciate that. And I was like, man, that's such a cool line. Like, I appreciate that he included that, and it just kind of adds another layer to Nathan, because somebody that's been in the Oblivion for so long and kind of goes back and forth, you would think that he would have a different view. So it just kind of shows you how compassionate that character is. And then issue number 4 kind of follows the pattern of issue 1 and 2, where it's more kind of expanding the universe. It does kind of tease some other aspects to this book, like the Faceless Man. They kind of tease a little bit, and they don't really go into what that is all about. So I'm excited to see what that's all about. And then it kind of leaves on a big cliffhanger, which I won't really get into a ton about issue number 5, because it is kind of an important issue. Nathan does kind of find what he's really been looking for. He gets to finally figure out where a lot of these people have been hiding in the Oblivion. They essentially build this huge city within this weird monster world. And so he kind of gets a taste of how they've been living, literally and figuratively. He gets a taste. And I really liked how this book, especially this issue, kind of reminded me a lot of Westworld. What that show kind of does is you have what's happening in the park. In this book, obviously, it's Oblivion, and then you kind of have what's happening in the real world, and the shit's starting to hit the fan in the real world. And so I'm definitely excited to see where that leads. So overall, if you can't already tell, I really enjoyed this book. I mean, you can say what you will about the Walking Dead TV show, which obviously Tyra and I have bashed that show over the last couple of years, but Kirkman definitely knows how to write, and he especially knows how to write these post-apocalyptic stories. Really loved his character work, especially with Nathan. His work with Nathan, like I said, there's so many layers to the character, and his character work is outstanding. I will say that the artwork was really, really well done. I love the look of the Oblivion. It definitely reminded me, I just literally finished The Last of Us, like I said earlier. I kind of did like a streaming walkthrough of it. And I never played that game before, and there's certain scenes in that game where you like have these spores that you have to put on a gas mask to kind of go through, and there's just these areas with all these spores, and like there's like this fungus that would grow on the walls and stuff and the floors and stuff like that, and that's what kind of the Oblivion reminded me of those scenes in The Last of Us, except for it's all over the place. And so I definitely appreciate that. I will say the monsters are leave a little bit to be desired. They're not the creepiest monsters I've ever seen, but I mean, they serve the purpose. So I appreciate it's not really about that, but it would be kind of cool to see cooler looking monsters. But other than that, that's pretty much the only negative thing I have to say about this book. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I started buying this book, I think, after the first time you talked about it, and I have not read any of the 5 issues. I am behind, but I am going to get caught up on it, so I'm looking forward to it.
For sure.
Cool, you ready for nerd news?
Yeah, we're going kind of long. I think this is the longest we've ever gone without getting to nerd news yet. So
Yeah, you had a lot to say about your game and your comic, bro.
I know that's mostly me. I love talking, so it shouldn't be a surprise. I think we'll make it up to our listeners at our Skyscraper review.
Okay, well I'll keep it. I only have 3 stories for nerd news, and they're pretty straightforward. So the first, and what I would consider to be the biggest thing to come out this week, is that Billy D is coming back as Lando in Star Wars Episode 9, which of course is going to be written, directed by J.J. Abrams. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, you almost have to bring him back because everybody else is either dead in real life or dead in the movies. So that's like one of the last connections you can have to the original trilogy at this point.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of people didn't like Solo or didn't see Solo, but I think anybody that I've talked to can agree that Donald Glover as Lando is kind of the best part of that movie. So it doesn't surprise me that they would bring back Lando to kind of, I don't want to say necessarily cash in on that, but I love The Force Awakens. I didn't quite love The Last Jedi as much as The Force Awakens, but one criticism that I do hear about that movie is it's just nostalgia overload. Like, I mean, it just kind of goes back to A New Hope, and JJ's doing this new movie, so it would kind of make sense that he would want somebody to kind of tie into the original trilogy.
Yeah, I'll be honest, man. Like, I like The Last Jedi. Like, it's fine. But the more I think about it, the more I hate to fall into the camp of people that are just vile on the internet, because I would never be like they are. But I mean, from an opinion standpoint, like, I don't think I like The Last Jedi as much as I thought I did, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into a ton of detail about it, because I mean, obviously we've already reviewed it and we've talked to Tony from Geeking in Indiana at our Indie PopCon episode. But I mean, that side story with DJ the hacker and all that stuff like that really bothered me. Like, the more I think about it, you don't even need that. Like, I don't know. That little side story really pisses me off the more I think about it.
I love The Force Awakens so much, and almost everything I loved about that movie, and all of the answers that I wanted to find out after watching that movie were just undone so nonchalantly in The Last Jedi. But you're right, we've talked about it, so we'll leave it at that. Let's see, there is going to be officially a Black Widow movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They've tapped a director. Her name is Kate Shortland. She'll be doing the movie, and they confirmed that it will take place before the first Avengers movie. So, not necessarily like set in the 90s like Captain Marvel was, but it is going to be a prequel of sorts that will, I'm guessing, explore a little bit more around Black Widow's origin.
Yeah, I mean, they've cast a director, but I will believe it when I see it. Like, I think this is another one of those movies, like, you can kind of chalk up with Gambit and a few others. Like, I have a little bit more faith that this gets made because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how good it is and how much people love it. But it's like it seems like people have been clamoring for this movie forever, and they've been trying to make it forever, and they're just now getting around to it. I don't know if it'll ever get made, but like I said, I have a lot more faith in this movie getting made than the Gambit movie. Plus, I think it is a cool idea. Like, she's a cool character, and I definitely think that she could hold her own movie, especially if they kind of go, not necessarily the Red Sparrow route, where she's essentially just a whore. She went to whore school or anything like that. Like, she's a badass character. I think if they kind of go more of a James Bond, like, spy movie with her, because honestly, she's an awesome fighter, she's an awesome spy, but she's not really a superhero. So I think if you can kind of go that route, it'd be really, really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. I did read an article that said, like, this could be the Marvel Cinematic Universe's James Bond, kind of like what you were saying. So I think that would be cool. I mean, I'm down to watch it. Like, I love ScarJo and I love the character, so I hope it gets made. And then last story I have is that Zombieland 2 is officially happening. Speaking of movies that probably won't get made, it's happening. It's, I believe, going to be released in late 2019 with all 4 original actors coming back. So Jesse Eisenberg, Woody Harrelson, Abigail Breslin, and Emma Stone, which blows my mind that somebody like Emma Stone would do Zombieland 2, because her career has obviously taken kind of a different path than those other actors, where she's more of a prominent figure at this point. But hey, like, I'm excited for it. Like, I don't know that it will ever be as good as the first one, but it's interesting to me that all of these all of these actors would come back and do it.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily think it's that great of an idea. I love the first one. I think it's fantastic. It came out right when I think we needed a Zombieland to come out, because the zombie fatigue was starting to kick in a little bit, and it's definitely a different type of zombie movie. So I think it's definitely one of those movies that we needed, but at this point we've already kind of gotten a bunch of those types of movies that have tried to like spin the genre a little bit. Like you had Warm Bodies, and you've had a few others that have tried to do a different take on the zombie genre. And now we're basically getting another one of those movies after we've already had a run of them. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily a good time for this movie to come out. I think that they probably should have just laid it to bed, and you had a good run with the first one, and that was about it. Because I know that they've, like you said, have been struggling to get this made for a while. They had that weird Zombieland Amazon pilot thing that never got really picked up, or maybe it was on YouTube, I don't remember. But that was just like a kind of like a reboot or something. I don't know exactly what it was. I never watched it because it looked like garbage. But yeah, I just think they waited too long to make this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It's going to be a decade after the first one came out by the time it releases. The first one came out in 2009. And I think the first one it came out before The Walking Dead. Like, it was kind of ahead of the curve with the zombie stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how they play into this genre at this point. So
for sure.
All right, man. Well, in the spirit of time, we will move on to our main topic if you're ready.
Yeah. So like we said, Skyscraper, when it came out this week, and we're going to be reviewing it. Before, real quick, because like I said, we're going a little bit long. Last episode with our Ant-Man and the Wasp, we got to do a segment that we hadn't done in a while, that we don't do it very often, called Trailer Trash. I don't know what trailers that you saw before Skyscraper, but I saw 3 that could be considered trailer trash, and I'll just run through them really quickly because they were all 3 just like one after another. I was like, man, if this was before a different movie, this would be trailer trash. But since it was all 3 of them, it kind of set the tone for what audience they thought they were going to get with Skyscraper. So the first one, and I didn't even bother to write down the name of the fucking movie because all I could think was it was just a Transformer dog movie.
Oh my God. No, I saw it whenever we saw, I think, Ant-Man. It doesn't look like a real movie.
No, and I'm going to say this about Skyscraper, so I'm going to kind of blow my load, but it looks like a fake movie that a trailer that they would show for a trailer, like a preview for a movie that like characters are seeing in a movie. Like, that's how just like fake movie. It reminded me of that, I can't even remember what the movie was called, like Monster Truck or whatever, where that stupid like flubber monster lived in his truck. And I literally like it even had that same feel to it. I was like, are they making another one of those stupid fucking Monster Truck movies? Like, that's literally what I thought it was. And then I saw the Transformer dog and I was like, are you fucking kidding me right now? So yeah, there was that. And you might disagree with me on the second one, but I think the Taron Egerton Robin Hood trailer looks fucking awful. It looks so stupid. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times at this point. For me, it was just like another Robin Hood movie. Like, you know, we had this one, we had the Russell Crowe one, we've had the Kevin Costner one. I mean, none of those
Mel
movies
Brooks?
have ever... Yeah. None of those movies have ever lived up to the greatest Robin Hood movie of all, which is the animated Disney classic from the 70s.
You better fucking watch your mouth. Man in Tights is a fantastic movie.
No, you're right. Like that, I love Taron Egerton, so I want to give it the benefit of the doubt, but there's just no way. There's no way that's good. The story's too played out. What do you do with it that's interesting, but that still holds true to the character? Like, there's nothing.
Honestly, I forgot that they were making another Robin Hood movie, and they kept calling him the thief. And he kind of was dressed like there's an old video game. Well, I guess it's not that old. And it was really shitty. Like, it was a really bad game called Thief. And I was like, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel with these video game adaptations. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He's in the Robin Hood movie.
My favorite part of that Robin Hood trailer is that they, like, throughout the whole trailer, he wears a mask. And they're like, oh, who's Robin Hood? And he's like making like little witty comments about like putting a bounty on his head. And it's like the whole time you know it's Taron Egerton, and they make it like a big reveal when he pulls down the mask and he's Robin Hood. Like, it's just fucking dumb.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I don't know if you've seen this one. This made me a little sick to my stomach. The Jennifer Gardner Punisher movie, Peppermint. Did you see that?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, dude, you need to fucking look this up, cause it's straight up like the Punisher meets that stupid Bruce Willis movie, Death Wish. I mean, I know that was a remake of an older movie.
Yeah.
But that's what that movie is called. It's called Peppermint, and it looks so fucking stupid. Like, I at one point I was thinking they're gonna put the skull on her chest. Cause that's, I mean, straight up, it's just Jennifer Gardner as Punisher. That's what this movie is. It looks so fucking stupid, man. I was like so angry, and that put me in a weird headspace for Skyscraper, because after those 3 shitty trailers, I was like, let's just get this fucking movie over with.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, man. For me,
you need to look it up. You'll like hate your life after you watch this trailer.
Yeah, that sounds crazy, man. I didn't even know she was still an actress, so.
Yeah, for sure. I thought she just did the Capital One commercials. But,
exactly.
Speaking of Skyscraper, let's actually get to our review before this episode becomes 2 hours long. It was written and directed by Rayson Marshall Thurber. Again, I just need to admit or just go for it that there's no way I pronounce his name right. But he's actually done a lot. I never heard the name before, but I guess he's done a lot of comedies. He actually wrote and directed Dodgeball, which I had no idea. He's actually worked with The Rock before. On Central Intelligence, which I'm not sure if he wrote and directed that one or if he just directed that one. But he's worked with The Rock before. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stars in this movie, obviously. That's why I keep bringing him up. He stars as Will Sawyer, a former FBI agent, now security, god damn it, I don't know why I couldn't say that word, consultant who is tasked at signing off on an insurance policy for the tallest building in the world. When that building gets taken over by terrorists, Will must navigate the burning building to save his family. So, like I said, with the Transformer Dog trailer, when I first saw the trailer for Skyscraper, I literally thought it was a fake trailer. Like the trailer that you would see before characters in a movie would see a movie. Like, even the fact that it's called Skyscraper, which is a stupid and cheesy name, I was like, that's a fake trailer. Like, that's a fake movie. Like, even the fact that it had The Rock in it, I still wasn't convinced that it wasn't fake. Like, literally, I couldn't believe it. I had to look it up. And I still didn't believe it. It was like the Danny McBride, Crocodile Dundee thing. Like, I wasn't, like, this can't possibly be a real movie. But obviously the closer we got to it, I mean, it is a real movie. And I assumed that I wouldn't see it, but just because the summer is what the summer is, there's a couple of weeks here and there every summer that there just isn't anything. And there wasn't anything this week, and there really wasn't anything next week. So that's why we're gonna review Luke Cage season 2 like a month later after it came out. But the closer I got to this movie, the more I was just kind of hoping against hope, that kind of similar to how I felt when I went to go see The Great Wall, that it would be kind of in on the joke, and then it would kind of make fun of itself. And I kind of tweeted this out just kind of jokingly, like, if The Rock doesn't use his prosthetic leg to zip line, I was going to be disappointed in this movie. And I guess we'll get to that here in a little bit. But yeah, I was not looking forward to Skyscraper, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't either. I wasn't planning on seeing this movie until I had found out that you had slotted it to be the review for this week, and I was excited to go see it because it meant I didn't have to binge Luke Cage in a day. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think this movie looked good at all. You know, you think about the last year, we've had 3 movies from The Rock, right? So Jumanji, Rampage, and Skyscraper, and we can kind of maybe get at the end of the review to where this falls for you within those 3. But
what was the second one?
Rampage.
Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot about that movie.
Yeah, so, which I think that we'll be saying the same thing about this movie in a few months, that we just forgot about it because it's super forgettable. And, yeah, I don't think either of us would have seen it had we not had this podcast to record.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was still like, even leading up to it, even though I had made out the schedule and slotted this in for this week, I was still like a couple of days before I went and saw this movie, I was still kind of like looking for something else to do. But if we did Luke Cage, this week, then we wouldn't have anything for next week, and next week's even uglier. So yeah, it kind of worked out that way. So if this is your first episode, we break down each review as we break down the episode into different segments. The first segment is just kind of a general overview of what we thought about the movie, and then we'll kind of break it down further and further as the review goes. And we call this first segment Broad Strokes. So how'd you feel about Skyscraper?
Can I just say, for my broad strokes, I really did not like this movie. No, I mean, typically, you know, I can find enjoyment in any of The Rock's movies because he's charismatic and he's funny, and that typically elevates the shitty story in some way. However, all of that stuff that I love about The Rock is lacking here, and the plot is so derivative and forgetful that I walked away already forgetting story beats because it was just so hard to pay attention because it was such a boring movie. It just is not good.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I might give this movie a little bit more credit than it sounds like you will. Just because I think after those shitty trailers, my expectations were pretty low. I mean, they were low going into this movie anyways, and so I was a little bit surprised that it wasn't like lowest common denominator action movie. Like it at least tried to be a little bit better. So I might like this movie a little bit more than you, but like is a very strong word in this particular case. So this is going to be a weird association, but I kept thinking as I was watching this movie. So we had a buddy, and maybe buddy is a strong word. We had a guy that Tyler and I worked with, and he considered himself a big movie buff, and I guess technically he was because he did go see movies a lot. But basically, I used to give him a lot of shit, among other things. I would give him shit about a lot of things, but mostly because he would like any movie as long as it had like explosions in it. Like he liked every action movie ever made. I remember the last time I ever saw this dude. It's been years. It would just so happen I was walking out of a movie while he was walking out of a movie, and he was walking out of Terminator Genesis. So it's been quite a long time since I've seen this guy. And he was just telling me how much he loved that movie. And obviously, we reviewed that movie, so we saw it when it first came out. So I had already seen it at that point. And I was just like, man, do I really have to, I don't work with you anymore. Do I really have to sit here and listen to you how good, or I almost said Transformers, but I mean, I might as well have said Transformers as a shit show that Terminator movie was. But like, I feel like as I was watching this movie, I was like, I bet this guy would love this fucking movie. Like it was just an action movie. It was just your run-of-the-mill action movie. Even though it did attempt occasionally to be more than that, it just wasn't good enough to be more than that. And it just, like you said, it's Rampage 2. Like, I forgot Rampage even existed until you just brought it up just now. And we fucking watched it together when I was in Cleveland, and we reviewed it, and I still forgot that it was a thing. And this is just another Rampage movie that, well, we've talked about this a lot with Rock's career. Like, he does a lot of stuff, and he's definitely grown as an entertainer and more importantly, as an actor over doing all of these different things, these different projects. This is not going to be a project that we're going to look back on and be like, yeah, I'm glad that he was in this one fucking Die Hard ripoff movie.
For sure, dude. I mean, it sounds like we're pretty much on the same page here.
All right, so let's go right into story. This might be the shortest story segment I think I've ever done. Like, I really struggled to, like you, I saw this movie on Thursday, so it's been longer since I've seen this movie, and I really struggled. I literally got home after I saw this movie and was like, I need to write a few things down, because if I don't, I'm not going to remember anything about this movie.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I mean, the story is, you know, obviously the biggest issue for this movie. I think leading up to it, everyone called it a Die Hard ripoff. And while I could care less because I'm not the biggest Die Hard fan, this movie still fell incredibly short of being anything that I'd consider entertaining. You know, I mentioned in broad strokes that it was forgettable, and I think it comes down to, like, this is just like what you were saying. It's a generic action movie. There's nothing special about it. I mean, I brought up that this is his third movie in like the last 8 or 9 months. And when you look at Jumanji and you look at Rampage, we reviewed both. We gave Jumanji a positive review, and even though we gave Rampage a negative review, at least it wasn't boring. Like,
yeah,
like there were comedic parts. There were parts where we laughed at the dumb gorilla. Like, you know, there were things that got elicited a response.
Hey, don't call The Rock a dumb gorilla.
Man,
I was really excited about that joke too. I was like, as soon as I thought about it, I was like, man, that's a good joke. But yeah, it wasn't.
Oh yeah. No, it wasn't bad. So, this movie just felt like something that used to go direct to DVD. It lacked any type of charisma that makes I can't even say his name, The Rock movies enjoyable. If it had just, like you said, embraced its silliness and poked fun at itself, I think we'd possibly be having a different conversation here. But instead, it takes itself way too seriously throughout the entire story. And then on top of all of that, like, you just have characters that make dumb decisions, especially the villains in this movie. You know, there's just so much negative to talk about from the story standpoint. I mean, the one positive thing I'll say about it is that there's a story beat in the third act that I really appreciated. In a movie like this, you wouldn't necessarily expect things to go a certain route. And even though it was planted at the beginning of the movie very heavily, and you could tell that that was something that was going to come back later in the movie, I'm happy with the person that ends up kind of saving the day. So I will say that that was a breath of fresh air and like a meathead action movie. But overall, like, there's just not much else to say about it that's positive.
Yeah, so we're seeing eye to eye on this movie. If you hadn't already guessed, it is a Die Hard ripoff. That's pretty much what it is. I mean, I talked about this a little bit with Jurassic World. Fallen Kingdom is like, everybody was saying going into that movie, like, it's just the lost world. And I said in that review that it never did anything to get away from that. And this movie never really does anything to get away from the Die Hard ripoff stigma that's attached to it. And I almost, like I said at the beginning, like when I went into Great Wall, like I was really hoping that this movie, despite that movie not doing that, is I was kind of hoping that this movie would kind of be in on the joke. And I went into it thinking, like, maybe they'll just even have him say, like, yippee-ki-yay or something, just to, like, wink at the audience a little bit. But obviously it didn't do that. I mean, there's a little comedy here and there, but there's no meta or anything self-aware or anything like that. And there's not a ton of comedy in it either. Like, it definitely, I wouldn't say it necessarily takes itself too seriously, but it definitely takes itself pretty seriously. In my synopsis, I never mentioned Rock's prosthetic leg, and that was done on purpose because it doesn't fucking matter at all in this movie one bit. The fact that he has a prosthetic leg does not matter whatsoever. It felt like cheap character development. They tried a little bit to give him a backstory and to kind of make him like even a more sympathetic character. They tried a few things, like I said, despite them trying, none of these things really work. Like, there's some things that happen at the beginning of the movie that kind of make him his buddy earlier in the movie. Like, be a little bit more sympathetic, but that didn't really work. Plus, The Rock just doesn't like guns, but that doesn't matter later in the movie. Like, they did all of these things to try to make Will more interesting, but it just wasn't, like, they didn't actually develop those things to make them make sense later in the movie. So it just didn't make a difference towards the end. And I'm glad that you said something about planting, because I felt like, yes, like I said, in broad strokes, like, they did try, but everything that they tried was planted so fucking hard in this movie that you knew it was coming. Like, you get planting in movies. I mean, you can't help it. If you've seen one movie, you know that directors and filmmakers don't put certain scenes, like, they seem meaningless at the time, but they don't put those in there just for shits and giggles. Like, it's going to eventually come back. And there was probably, I would say, if I had to, like, rewatch this movie, if somebody was, like, torturing me and making me rewatch this movie, there was probably like 5 or 6 things that you can count in this movie that just like, oh yeah, that's gonna come back later, and it does eventually come back. So the planting was really hard, even though I do want to give them a small amount of credit for at least trying. It was kind of all for naught because they planted those things so hard. And you mentioned that you appreciated somebody kind of saving the day towards the end. I will say that the terrorists' endgame in this movie, even though I do agree with what you said, their endgame was really fucking stupid. Just not creative at all. And I don't know, like, there had to have been a better idea. Like, this felt like a first draft idea, and they just never got past it.
This movie feels like a first draft idea that they never got past.
And I don't understand it. Like I said, this guy, even though I had never heard his name before, like, he's done some interesting stuff. Like, not all great, but he's done some interesting stuff. So it's not like this is his first movie.
Well, you would think, since he has such a history with comedies, that there would be more comedic elements to this, like more lightheartedness, and there just isn't. It's super gritty and not fun.
Yeah, for sure. So, performances.
I mean, like, does it even matter? So,
I had a hard time with performances because usually we talk about how it's easier to pick out how bad people are, but in this movie, I don't think there was necessarily anybody bad. It just, nobody was good.
I mean, I liked that Neve Campbell was in this movie because I like her and I liked seeing her do things. So I think at one point she almost retired from acting. So I'm glad that she's still working and she was chosen for this role. I think she does a good job. I mean, The Rock is The Rock, but without his charisma. And then everybody else is forgettable. I will say, I don't know the actress's name. There is an actress that plays like one of the terrorists, and I believe she has one line in the movie. And the delivery of that one line is so poor that I made a mental note to be sure to bring it up on the podcast. I couldn't tell you what her name was, what her character's name was, but she's just the one badass chick terrorist that...
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought her up, because when you first see that character, I thought that it was just the Asian version of the John Wick 2 character. The deaf assassin. I was like,
Ruby Rose.
They look exactly alike. Like, it blew me away.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. That actress's name is Ruby Rose. She's also in The Meg, which I know you're looking forward to.
I'm really looking forward to it. Speaking of a movie that I really hope pokes fun at itself, like, that movie can't take itself seriously, right? It's got fucking Dwight in it.
We'll see, man. If that movie takes itself seriously, then everything at this point's a lost cause. What are we even doing with this podcast?
I mean, we'll be reviewing that movie and when it comes out in a few weeks, but other than that, like, if that movie takes itself too seriously, I might just fucking walk out. Like, the only reason that movie exists, and the only reason I thought, trying to bring it back a little bit to Skyscraper, that this movie existed was to poke fun at itself and have fun, especially given the writer and director's background in comedy, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Yeah, I completely agree with you with the performances. The Rock, like I said, has really grown over the years, but this is definitely not a performance that you're going to point to and be like, hey, see how he's grown. Like Jumanji is that movie for sure. This movie, not so much. Like literally, he's not that bad in this movie. I don't actually think he's bad at all. It just, for me, this movie is so generic that it literally could have been anyone.
Yeah.
Like he didn't bring anything interesting to this role. Like it literally could have been anyone. Honestly, I would have thought it would be funny if it was Bruce Willis, but I also I have this in my note. This is kind of going, hand in hand with that. I also thought that it would be really funny, if they had gotten Reginald V. Johnson to be like the cop on the ground. Like it would make sense because they're in Hong Kong, but yeah, I thought that would be kind of fun. I mean, I just really wanted them to make fun of themselves, and that obviously just didn't happen. I will say, I'm not sure what happened to Pablo Schreiber. I mean, you were in the fucking Wire, dude. What happened to your career? He was in the fucking Wire, and he was like a main character in season 2, and he was really good in that show, and he hasn't done shit since. I will agree with you. I was happy to see Neve Campbell working again. She is in House of Cards. She does play a pretty interesting character in that show. So I did know that she was still around, but she wasn't used at all. Like basically everybody in this movie, like nobody was bad, but they weren't good. This has nothing to do with performances, and I didn't even bother to write down the guy's name. But the main terrorist guy, like I was just looking at his IMDb because I was just curious what else he had been in because he looked familiar. But I never got that far because I was very distracted because they always provide like pictures of the person, and he, coming from one hat guy to another, he needs to learn how to wear a fucking hat. He looks like the biggest douche. Like he has like trucker hats, but they're not on not only are they're on sideways, but they're not like completely on his head. He looks like the biggest fucking douche. You need to go to his IMDb page and check this out because it was really, really douchey. But I mean, he was fine. He was the foreign terrorist guy. Like he was all right.
Cool. So you ready for action?
Yeah, and this was the segment that I thought that this movie would shine, obviously, because it's an action movie, but this is further proof that you actually have to care about the characters to actually care about the action. Like, I didn't care about the stakes at all, so none of the action really kind of gripped me at all. I am, as Tyler has brought up a couple of times on the podcast, and I brought up on some of my video game walkthrough videos, I'm terrified of heights. Even in, like, movies and like video games and stuff like that. Like if my character or the characters on screen have to like go up like tall buildings or whatever, it freaks me the fuck out. Like I mentioned that in some of my Far Cry videos, like you have to like climb up like the radio towers and shit, and it freaks me the fuck out. In this movie, I thought that was going to be the same, but I didn't give a shit. I did not care about this movie or these characters at all, so I didn't care. I will say the Pearl scene did freak me out a little bit, but other than that, I just didn't care because I just didn't care about these characters. And again, this is just a generic action movie. There really wasn't a whole lot going on, and I just don't care about the stakes if I don't care about the characters. I think I got more enjoyment before I went to this movie and was reading some of the people's tweets about like how the jump isn't physically possible, the jump that he makes. I got more enjoyment out of those tweets than I did in any action scene in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that the action was really bad, and that was the one place you would want a movie like this to shine. I think at the end of the day, part of it is just watching The Rock do pull-ups and other workouts, just incredibly high up. And it just wasn't interesting to me. So I think my favorite part of the action was probably the hand-to-hand fight that takes place in an apartment towards the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And to say that is your favorite action piece in a movie about a skyscraper, you know, that's probably the lowest scope thing that happens in this movie, and that was my favorite. So that should tell you a little bit about how I feel about the rest of the action that takes place actually at the skyscraper. It just wasn't fun. It wasn't interesting. It didn't have my buy-in. So, yeah, that's kind of where I stand, too.
And we never, ever got the zip line. Like, why even have a prosthetic leg character if you're not going to then have him zip line across something using his prosthetic leg? Like, that's a wasted opportunity.
There is the part where he props open a door with his leg and then he kisses his leg to say thank you. Like, oh, thanks, I have this leg. And that was pretty cringeworthy because, like, I did read, like, some tweets. Like, I think people out there that, you know, have lost a limb appreciate that they didn't make it like a spectacle in the movie and they didn't like, do that kind of stuff with it. But
it's not a gimmick.
But again, what's the point of it? Like, if it played more of a role with his character, I think that, you know, we'd be having a different conversation about the leg. But like you said at the beginning, it was just weak character development in a way.
For sure. So obviously we're not going to, I don't think either one of us is going to give it a high star rating. We've already established on past episodes that 3 stars out of 5 is a recommendation. I'd be really surprised if, I know I'm not going to give this a 3-star review, but what do you think about Skyscraper?
I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, that makes sense because, like I said at the beginning, it sounded like I was a little bit more positive than you were. So I'm going to give it a 2.5. It's not a bad movie. It's just a generic movie. Don't waste your time on it.
Which did you like better, this or Rampage?
I liked Rampage better. I mean, I have a thing for gorillas and monkeys. Like, obviously, being a huge Planet of the Apes fan, I did appreciate that. And there was some comedy. There was some, I wouldn't say necessarily self-aware comedy, and there was stuff about that movie, obviously, that we didn't like because we didn't necessarily give it too favorably of a review, but I definitely liked it more than this movie.
I agree.
All right, so what's nerd favorite this week?
Yeah, so we cap off every episode with a nerd favorite. Just taking turns asking what our favorite blank is or some kind of nerdy question. So it's my week to ask the question. And whenever I watched Skyscraper, I got to thinking about The Good Times, which were the movies that have come out this year that I enjoyed. So I was just curious, like we're a little over halfway through the year. Obviously there's still a lot of movies coming out that will impact our top 10 at the end of the year, but I'm just curious, as of right now, with the movies you've seen in 2018, what your favorite film is. I'm going to go first, and I think the answer to this question, I wouldn't have answered this movie as my favorite so far when I first saw it, but to see, like, what a big role that it's played in nerd culture, and that people still make memes about it, and then just how much I still think about this movie, and look forward to the conclusion of the story. For me, it has to be Infinity War.
Yeah.
It was such a big movie. And like I said, the fact that people are still talking about that, like 3 months later or 2 months later, whatever it's been. And, all of the things that happened in that movie, like it's still a brainworm for me that I go back to and think about. So yeah, it's gotta be that one.
So yeah, that's the most obvious answer, and obviously for the sake of conversation, I'm going to pick a different movie. So far I have 9 movies. I keep track of them on Letterboxd. It's a private list, so you motherfuckers can't check it out. But I don't want to ruin our top 10 of the year episode that we do every year. So you motherfuckers can't check that out. I should probably stop calling our listeners motherfuckers. That's like the second episode in a row that I've done that. So I apologize for that. So I think, like, I'm having a hard time between Black Panther, Andre the Giant, and Game Night, which is kind of the surprise of the year for me. I really enjoyed that movie. I'm going to have to rewatch that soon. Maybe it was just the first time I saw it. I was really kind of blown away by how funny it was. So maybe I just need to rewatch that because it's not on, I doubt that it's on too many people's, best of the year lists. But I think ultimately, I gotta go with Black Panther. I've seen that movie a couple of times since then. I've actually watched last week when I was editing last week's episode because it was my week to edit. I watched Black Panther with director's commentary, and I love that kind of stuff, and I appreciate that movie more and more every time I watch it, and especially with the director's commentary. They actually had the producer as well, so it was kind of cool to listen to them because she can provide a different perspective than the director can, because she has to work on certain things that the director doesn't have to work on. So I really loved that director's commentary, so definitely check that out. So I think I would definitely go with Black Panther, even though Andre the Giant was really great. And again, Game Night was kind of the surprise of the year for me so far.
Yes, there's a Letterboxd list I've wanted to do for a while now, which is a complete ranking of the 2018 movies I've seen. The only thing that's kind of holding me back from that is that it would again spoil our top 10 at the end of the year. So I don't know. Stay tuned. I might do that.
So real quick, because again, we're going pretty long this episode. What is your least favorite so far? Would you say it be Skyscraper?
No, there's got to be something else, right? A Cloverfield Paradox I disliked more than Skyscraper.
Yeah, I think that was probably mine too.
The Strangers Pray at Night was really bad. I don't know. I might like that movie actually more than Skyscraper, though. Yeah, or Life of the Party. I had to see that, so that was pretty bad. So yeah, there's some other ones besides Skyscraper that would probably take the worst. I'm actually surprised. I figured that for your favorite movie of the year, you were going to say A Quiet Place.
Yes, I actually just got that on Blu-ray. It just came out recently. I will say I will complain to Best Buy. The 4K Steelbook that I really wanted was like $45 fucking dollars. I was like, no way, brah. I was like, there's no way I'm going to pay for it. And I would rather take the 4K than the Steelbook. So I was somewhat considering just getting the Blu-ray Steelbook, which they don't offer that on every single movie, but there was a Blu-ray Steelbook and there was a 4K Steelbook. I think it was actually the same thing as far as the Steelbook was concerned, but the 4K was like $45 fucking dollars. So I ended up getting the Amazon 4K Quiet Place, but I haven't watched it yet. I just got it on Thursday. Cause I was a little bit late to pre-ordering it, so I didn't get it on the Tuesday it came out. But I haven't watched it. I'm planning on watching it tonight, actually, while I'm, kind of posting this review. So hopefully, I'll get to it. And I really want to rewatch that movie just to see if it was just the theater experience and the fact that there was little sound in the movie, and just kind of those little things kind of caught me off guard for that movie and just kind of really blew me away while I was in theaters. So I'm hoping that it's not just like a knee-jerk reaction the first time I saw it, and that it holds up the second time or third time I watch it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that is one of our longer episodes that we've done in a while. I believe this is episode 198. I say that every time. I mean, I keep track of it. I don't know why I'm like always like not sure that that's the number, but I'm pretty sure it's 198. As always, as Tyler said at the beginning of this episode, you can find us at a bunch of different places. We appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use, we're probably on it. Check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com, where you can check out pretty much everything that we do. You can check out every star rating that we've ever reviewed for a movie. You can check out our letterbox, which you can follow Tyler at Tyler Hunt, me at the Nerds Podcast, because I got the letterbox first, so I got the actual Nerds Podcast handle. You can check out the YouTube, so that has the recent YouTube videos that I've posted as well. Speaking of that, you can comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. You can also check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Those are both at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google Plus if you're one of the few Google employees that use Google Plus. And then you can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And finally, vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.